In honor of Creepy Crawly Week, we're going to talk about molds. Finding mold in your house is not a pleasant experience. It can cause serious breathing and health problems, and what's worse, it can be a real pain to get rid of. But the situation is even worse than that in houses that have moonlighted as marijuana grow-ops. They are literally stuffed with toxic mold. So how do you get rid of it all? Check this out. This suburban house is under quarantine, but not for vermin or insects.
I believe that the conditions inside this house would suggest that it was probably used for some type of growing operation, marijuana.
Indoor marijuana grow operations are big business, and organized criminals are cashing in. These stealth operations not only put quiet neighborhoods in harm's way, but they leave a toxic legacy long after the plants are removed. Mold.
It's the humidity that allows the mold to grow. So unlike a leak where the mold grows in the area that the leak occurred, in those type of situations in the marijuana grow houses, the mold can be anywhere.
Thankfully, Darren has a cool new weapon to make his job easier. But before that happens, he must protect the surrounding houses from contamination.
We use negative pressure in the same way that asbestos remediation is done. That way you're drawing air from the outside into the structure at all times, so there's no danger of release of contamination from outside of the structure.
Darren must also protect himself. He must don booties, a full protective suit, gloves, and a full mask air purifying respirator. And that goes for our camera crew as well. Once geared up, we head through the decontamination area and into the suspected marijuana grow house. Doesn't take long for Darren to spot the mold.
We can see there's some evidence of mold growth here, but there could be a lot more underneath this carpet as well. You typically see the mold growth on the exterior wall because you get thermal bridging occurring here. It's a cold spot.
Downstairs, Darren finds even more evidence.
The molds typically like the dark environment of wall cavities. Most molds don't like ultraviolet light. So often what you see on the surface is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot more in behind. As you can see, a lot of mold growth here. Wow. In a grow house, this laundry room could typically have been used for creating the washing facility. But as you can see, it's in the walls, in the wall cavities, it's growing on the wall studs here. If I was to hazard a guess at it, I would probably say that this has some Aspergillus, some Penicillium species, Stachybotrys. Those are all ones that can have the mycotoxins and can cause some very serious health effects.
These health effects range from ear infections to bleeding lungs. What's more, the homeowner who rented out the space is responsible for the cleanup, a process that must be done by hand.
It can be typically anything from $100,000 to $200,000 worth of cleanup on a typical 2,500 square foot subdivision house. The numbers are staggering.
But according to Darren, there is hope.
So here we are a couple of weeks later. All the insulation and drywall's been removed, but there's still a lot of mold contamination on the lumber. As you can see, here's an example. So traditionally this would be removed by sanding or scrubbing to remove the mold contamination, but we use new technology, dry ice blasting. So there we have it, new technology at work. The dry ice literally strips the mold in about an 1/8 to a 1/16 of the lumber itself, doesn't damage the electrical, and we have a beautifully clean, fresh piece of lumber again.
So how does it work?
First of all, we've got the initial energy transfer, the impact of those rice grains hitting the substrate. Normally it would be considered a non-abrasive cleaning method, but with lumber you do get slight abrasion. The second stage of that instantaneous clean is associated with the microthermal shock, the dry ice rice being at about minus 79 degrees centigrade or minus 109 Fahrenheit equivalent. That instantaneous cold helps split the contamination that's on this substrate. And then the third part of it is the gas pressure. As those particles impact against this substrate, they turn from solid to a gaseous state as they warm, and you get a gas pressure release as part of that process. And that's how it strips and works and cleans so effectively.
And while it's easy to see the results, the biggest payoff for Darren is time.
One of the big beauties of the dry ice blaster is that it gets right into the tight areas where conventional cleaning and scrubbing, it's difficult to get the tools and the hands in and to do a proper job. But as you can see, the blaster brings this area beautifully clean. And we figure it's about a 300% saving on our labor time. So it's a big savings for the customer at the end, and it also produces a much better cleaned product.
Well, now you've seen what Mould can do to a house. My advice is, if you're a consumer, before you buy, have a full indoor environmental assessment done, know what you're buying, and if you're renting, know who you're renting from.
Speaking of unwanted visitors in your home, the termite's insatiable appetite for wood